Well, let us discuss several issues that define Sino-American relations today. So, first and foremost, the issue of Taiwan. Since Taiwanese independence in 1949, the People's Republic of China, or mainland China, continues to see Taiwan as a part of itself. It sees the Taiwanese people as just the Chinese people, and it seeks reunification of mainland China and Taiwan. Now, people in Taiwan have a somewhat different perspective. There's a distinct Taiwanese identity that has developed over the decades, and neither the people of Taiwan nor the government of Taiwan presently are particularly eager to actually go back into the fold of the larger continental China. From the point of view of the United States, the U.S. Navy guarantees Taiwan's independence. And so, from the Chinese point of view, the U.S. Navy is a hindrance toward reabsorbing Taiwan into what it historically believes one civilization and one country. Uh, so, the problem is how much interest do we as the United States have in it, and how much interest does China have in it? And certainly, China seems to have a lot more interest because it's right next door, and certainly, this is their backyard. This is their people. But nevertheless, the interest of the United States lies in the idea of preventing too much Chinese influence in the region. So that is why we want Taiwan to remain an independent country. Now, the second issue would be of economic nature. China has lent a lot of money to the United States. The Chinese buy US dollars, they convert their currency into dollars, and then they use those dollars to buy America's debt. So they buy US Treasury bonds, the United States gets the money, and the Chinese get the regular interest payments on the debt that they own. Now, part of the problem is that this is a relationship of mutual dependency. Some called it Chimerica, particularly Neil Ferguson, the British-born economic historian, has called it Chimerica. The Chinese lend the United States the money, and the United States uses that money to buy goods manufactured in China. So while China is really the workshop to the world, much of what it sells for U.S. consumption. So Americans, in order to continue to fuel their consumption and continue to meet demand for industrially produced goods inside the United States, use the money they borrowed from China in order to buy things manufactured in China. So there's a relationship of mutual dependence. And some say, well, it's too unhealthy. But however, one advantage of it is the economies are so tied together that they have become, for practical purposes, a single economy, as Zachary Karabel, for example, argued in his book called Superfusion, that the American economy and the Chinese economy are basically a single economy. Now, there's also other issues. An issue of espionage is particularly prominent because no country spies on the United States in terms of cyber espionage as much as China. China is interested in both military and purely economic secrets. In terms of economic espionage, they would love to take as much as they can from us and then reverse engineer it so they could build it for themselves. And in terms of military secrets, China has been trying for a long time to modernize its Air Force and particularly its Navy. And so they want to have all the military secrets they can possibly get. Yet another issue is intellectual property. American movies and songs are very popular in China, and certainly piracy of these is a major issue. So Americans continue to claim that intellectual property of its citizens is being infringed on when the Chinese pirate the DVDs or simply download digital files without permission of the artists or whoever owns the copyright on these cultural products. But there isn't too much that we can do in terms of enforcing these laws inside China. To some extent, as far as I understand, piracy of intellectual property remains a major issue and remains kind of a lawless issue inside China. There are also other considerations that play into the relationship between the United States and China. China has become, in general, much more assertive in its foreign policy, some would even say aggressive. The Chinese have been building artificial islands in the South China Sea. In the northeast, the Chinese are at loggerheads with Japan. There's a territorial dispute over some islands. And in the South China Sea, China has a dispute with its perennial rivals, the Philippines and Vietnam. In fact, the anti-Chinese sentiment in Vietnam has reached very troubling proportions. You might have heard about the riots, the anti-Chinese riots that took place in Vietnam in 2014 as a result of the Vietnamese workers being disenchanted with the working conditions of Chinese-owned enterprises. Further down the road, we might also see conflicts between China and Malaysia and China and Indonesia. Both of those countries, particularly Malaysia, have a significant Chinese minority. And in Indonesia, the Chinese, who make up roughly 20% of the population, control much of the Malaysian economy. In Indonesia, the proportion of ethnic Chinese is much smaller. It's about 4%. But they have experienced genocidal treatment in the late 1960s at the hands of General Suharto's regime. So there's a difficult relationship in some countries between the Chinese diaspora and the host country. And of course, now it's not just the host country, that those countries are the native countries of the ethnic Chinese who live there. And yet, should any mistreatment occur or continue to occur, we can potentially see a confrontation between China and Malaysia or China and Indonesia. So these are the issues. Of course, coloring all of this is the fact that no bilateral relationship really takes place in a vacuum. We have to consider other relationships, and what we see actually is that, as the scholar Barry Buzan put it, China has no friends. In other words, it has to fend for itself alone. I do not know how true that really is. I think maybe Pakistan is China's friend. At least Pakistan has a strategic alliance, and there's a lot of cooperation between the respective militaries and intelligence services of both countries. Clearly, most of this is the cause of India being the common rival of both of these countries. But we also have to remember that relations between China and Russia seem to have thawed in recent decades. Since the late 1990s, the relationship has improved. They seem to have been able to settle their territorial disputes, and certainly on the Russian side, they try to cozy up to China. And the official Russian line, the Russian propaganda, is really that China is a friend of Russia. That probably is an overstatement. China has its own interests and its own designs in Asia's northeast. But that said, I think that the Russian side of the Chinese relationship is secured. The Sino-Russian relationship for now appears to be at least stable and at most friendly. With the Pakistan, China maintains, as I said, a strategic relationship of cooperation. But when it comes to other countries, yeah, all of that is certainly difficult. With Japan, as I mentioned, territorial disputes and also historical memory of the Second World War. Vietnam is an ancient rival of China, and in recent times, China and Vietnam fought a war in 1979. And of course, the dispute with both Vietnam and the Philippines in the South China Sea. Now, India is a rival. China and India fought a war in the Himalayas in 1962, which China won. In the region, China has been seen for the longest time as being a different, a unique, and a somewhat cantankerous giant who seems to dominate the region, be it by the tribute system in the medieval period, or more recently by trying to show force by creating these artificial islands and claiming the natural ones for its exclusive territorial possession. So there's no love lost, certainly between China and almost all of its neighbors. but the very fact that its relationship with Russia is relatively secure, and the very fact that it gets along quite well with Pakistan give China some balance, give it some footing. So it's not completely isolated. North Korea is China's friend, but North Korea really is more of a liability than a friend. It has continued to exist for the longest time now, thanks to the Chinese aid, financial and humanitarian aid in terms of food and supplies. It is actually quite possible that without the aid from China, North Korean government would have collapsed a long time ago, perhaps resulting in millions of people fleeing North Korea to China. And this is one reason why China continues to prop up North Korea, because it does not want to face a monstrous refugee crisis, and the refugees would most likely go into its northeastern cities, its Silicon Valley, Dalian. China does not want this disorder. It's trying to prevent this. And of course, it's wary of South Korea absorbing North Korea. And this would mean that American troops essentially would be right on the Chinese border. There would be no buffer zone, no country separating the American troops from the Chinese border. So, given the experience of the Korean War, in which the Chinese lost approximately 500,000 soldiers fighting Americans, China is not particularly eager of allowing the United States this close access to its border. So this is basically it. The relationship remains a relationship of mutual dependence and a relationship of tension with this very uncertain course, because we might see in the coming years a partial decoupling of mutual financial and trade dependence, which some say would be healthy, but with that possible decoupling, there will be less of a rationale for countries to remain on friendly or even civil terms. So I think we might look forward to some turmoil in the Sino-American relations in the 21st century.